Alright guys, welcome back to WODtv. I'm here again with Cam Burtwell. We want to address some of the, I guess, concerns or controversy around some of the regional workouts. There's a lot of belly aching and crying online, for lack of a better word, about particular results or events that people were unhappy with. So what we want to do is, there's some analysis in the community online, and there's been a little bit of response from, say, CrossFit HQ, but we want to try and take, I guess, an objective, unbiased stance and just analyze some of these events and see, well, were some of the things that we saw appropriate or inappropriate in terms of programming. So let's dive right into it. Controversy number one, as you can see, I'm wearing the Union Jack on my Rogue shirt here. Sam Briggs, Rogue athlete, will not be returning to defend her title, and a lot of people are upset about this. Where do we want to begin?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting scenario. We've had a lot of people prior to the regionals suggesting, well, there are certain things that should not be in there. One of the things that was highlighted was the handstand walk, and that's what ended up taking Sam Briggs out of contention. In kind of my point of view, and we've discussed this a little bit, is that definitely each event is equally weighted, and we have in the past had a bias towards, a single event such as a strength event, but we haven't had a gymnastics event, a singular gymnastics event that's ever been weighted as much.
That's true, and I think that throws a lot of people off because maybe not everyone is as used to handstand walking as they are to, barbell snatching, and it's a lot more enjoyable to work on your 1RM lifts, and we don't see as much complaining and controversy when the CrossFit Games has a 1RM clean and jerk ladder. But when you put a max handstand walk in the regionals, there's a lot of complaining. But when we actually look at the results and see who got taken down by certain events, we actually see that some of these other workouts in the regionals were just as big of a culprit, if not more, in terms of skewing the results and taking people out of contention for the podium. So do we want to dive into some of those details?
Yeah, exactly. So we've kind of highlighted 3 workouts that really were, depending on the region and the individual, were determinants of their success in whether they made a podium spot or they didn't. So for some of those people, that was the handstand walk. For some of the other people, it was the snatch event. And then the third group of people was basically that final event, which everyone thought was going to be a wash, not that exciting. Turned out to be really, really important in the overall standings and who got the podium spot.
That's right. So some notable names that were taken down by the handstand walk. Obviously, Sam Briggs not going to be heading back. Danielle Siddell, who was in the Central East Regional, had a number of very high scores on other workouts, but the handstand walk sort of gave her a 30th place and took her down. And then our favorite girl, Ruth Anderson Horrell, who was from the Australia Regional, past Games competitor. She's another type of athlete that would and will do very well at the CrossFit Games, but didn't quite make it through that gateway of regionals where that one event was a deal breaker for her.
Exactly, and and those are 3 pretty strong competitors, obviously, all around. But had that event come up at the CrossFit Games, then they probably wouldn't have gotten a great placing. So it's kind of, I hate to use the term weeding out, but it is removing those people earlier on in the stage that may not have ended up winning if that event had been at the full CrossFit Games.
And similarly, we look at now the hang snatch. And we saw actually a lot of volatility there. For example, Canada East, Simone Paquette, past Games competitor, has done well at the Games. He didn't make a single lift and received a last place on that workout. He still managed to finish, top 8th overall?
8th overall, yeah.
But he had, 47 points on that one workout that he couldn't come back from. So people could just as easily complain about that and say, well, one workout, one modality, literally only 3 reps in that event took him out of contention for the Games. And is that fair? Well, some would say yes, some would say no, but it's not just the handstand walk.
Exactly, and we saw, with a less kind of massive challenge with the snatch, which Graham Holmberg came 11th in the snatch in Central East. All other scores were in the top 10, but he didn't make it. So handstand walk wasn't an issue for him. It was the snatch event that actually decided whether or not he went to the Games this year.
Past Games champion not going because of one event.
Yeah, and then the last event was really, really interesting. We saw an interplay of not only people's skill and fitness, but how fatigued were they at that point, what pressure was on them, and some people really capitalized on that, and some people really ended up kind of folding a little bit, unfortunately, under pressure, and you know, we saw even more lead changes there than we did in the handstand walk, which is pretty interesting. So specifically Emily Friedman, I guess,
from the Mid-Atlantic region, she was, you know, in contention for the podium all weekend, and then unfortunately took a 19th place on that last workout, which knocked her right down. And you know, one event spanning what, you know, 2 to 3 minutes for top competitors. Is that fair? That is the deal breaker. So if you look at any one event, you can make that argument, but the fitness test as a whole is the whole weekend, which is what you got to do well at.
Right.
And so we saw in other tight races, let's maybe look at our regional, Canada West. We had 2 people on the men and the women. We had Tyson Takasaki for the men, Emily Beers for the women, both sitting in 4th place at the end of the weekend, and they were able to jump up and take the podium spot because of that last workout, because they clutched up, because other people, you know, faltered. So a lot of volatility there.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, the pressure kind of, I always say pressure makes diamonds, you know, pressure makes diamonds, or it can also crumble you, right? So some of those people took the bull by the horns, so to speak, and really ended up, you know, making that last event theirs and booking their ticket right to Carson. And actually in Canada East as well, we had 3 individuals who ended up tied as a result of that last event. But it was Paul Tremblay who finished strong, went out really hard on that last event, and ended up taking the victory. So it's, you know, we like to say, okay, a handstand walk, you know, people like to pick on that, but what we saw was that final event was probably even more important than the handstand walk, except for unfortunately Sam Briggs and some others. So, and what's the takeaway, I guess, is that, you know, we're all fans of CrossFit, even the games athletes, and we want to see past champions return. And we get really worked up and emotional when our favorites don't quite make it. But before we go, you know, cry wolf and say that the programming is unfair or biased, we need to look at the weekend as a whole test and really see how it shakes out. And in general, people who were, you know, at the games on the regional podium in the past are still in those positions. Right. Yeah. So it's a somewhat consistent test. Arguably, the flavor of regionals, sort of the theme of regionals, does shift every year. But as a top athlete, it's, you know, it's not who can excel at one modality. It's who doesn't get taken down by one workout. Exactly. Yeah. And I think this year, even more so than previous years, the level of competition is much higher. Every regional is exciting. I think you mentioned that before. And you cannot afford to have any weaknesses, whether that's a gymnastic skill, strict handstand push-up, all these other things that really, and we are seeing, you know, Froning's at the top, you know, Annie Thorsdotter's there. We've got a lot of those top competitors coming through, so no weaknesses this year, that's for sure. Yeah, and it's going to be even more exciting and volatile and dramatic competition at the games. So I'm definitely going to be excited to be taking part in that. Yeah, we look forward to watching you.